So now I want to create the extra letter, the I, and also the symbol of a heart. And we'll just use this for repetition for emphasis. We'll reuse the text tool. So I'll come back up to my text tool and I'll go to the option settings for the text, and now I'll input I. Now here's a nice tip if we're creating several elements separately. Now we can use this Bevel Plus, we can use these settings within the option tools, and this will really speed up our workflow, because if I select my object on the viewport, I can now see the attributes that I used for my bevel width, depth, and extrude distance. So here I could use bevel of 0.02 for the width and depth, and the extrude distance of 1. So I won't have to modify any extra elements I create. So if I start creating additional logo elements such as this I start creating extra letters all separately, all of those will have the exact same bevel and extrude settings. So I'll just undo and get the I back to the default position. So now I have my I. Now let's create a heart symbol. The cool thing about the text tool is we can also create symbols. Now I know that the symbol for this is a capital Y, and you can look at a character map to be able to see different characters for different font types, but I'm going to use Webding's font. And Webding's font or Wingding's font are different font types that actually create symbols. So you can actually use this font tool to quickly create symbols such as the heart. So I'll hit OK. I'll make sure that the bevel settings are all the same, and then I'll hit Create to create that, and then close the application. Okay, so now I've created my eye, my heart, and the 3D text. They're all the right bevel and extrude, but the problem is they're all overlapped, and that's not very clean geometry. So let's fix this. Well, to fix this, we're going to need to use our transformation tools. So we're going to learn how to move, rotate, and scale. Now, one tip before we move, rotate, and scale is it's advised to always do this in a two-dimensional view. Currently, we're looking in a 3D environment. So let's take a look at how we can set up two-dimensional views. It's very easy. We can come over to our toolbox, which is this left-hand panel, and our default is a perspective view. We're going to switch to a 4-view layout. Now that we have geometry, you can immediately see what this is doing. Here we have our 3D perspective view. We have a top view, and look for the name in the lower center of each panel, and there you'll be able to see which view we're viewing. So we have a front view, and then finally a side view. So we want to align our logo. Here I'm going to use my front view. This would be the best view to align the different letters and stack those. So now that I'm in my front view, let's take a look at how we can use the Move tool. Now, the Move tool can be located over on the toolbox. So here we have our selection tool, Move, Rotate, and Scale. But I'm not going to use the toolbox to access these tools, because just like navigating, we're going to be transforming or manipulating objects 90% of the time. So it would be efficient to learn these hotkeys right away. And don't worry, we'll make this really easy to memorize these hotkeys. It's actually just the first 4 letters on your keyboard. So Q is your select tool, W is your move tool, E is your rotate, and R is your scale. So let's take a look at the move tool and how the move tool works. When I have it turned on, you can see that the gizmo is an X, Y, and Z axis, and that corresponds to this little tripod gizmo in the lower left-hand corner of each of your panels. Now, how to use this tool, you just hover over an arrow and then left mouse click and drag. So that allows me to move my object left and right if I'm using my x-axis, up and down with my y-axis, and forward and backwards with my z-axis. So let's practice using that tool by moving some of these logo elements so that they're not overlapped. So I'll start by selecting my eye, and I'll use the y-axis to move it above the 3D. I'll select the heart, and I'll use the x-axis to move it to the right, and the y-axis to move it up. So did you notice that I used my front view to move the objects and not my 3D view? Now, why is that? Well, the reason is because in our 3D view, the view is really relative. So if we move objects, it might look like one thing, but as soon as we navigate, we may notice that our object is not where we expected at all. So it's advised then to use our two-dimensional views because that constrains our tool to only move on two axes at one time, either up and down, side to side, or front and back, up and down, so that we never accidentally move on all 3D dimensions at one time. So this is a good, efficient way to work. You may have noticed that I can also move the Y and X at the same time by using the center of my Move gizmo. So here I'll just line up my heart above the 3D text. I can use the grids to help me to align this, and then I'll pull the eye in, and I'll make sure that the height is approximately the same on the grid to create just a nice clean logo presentation. So you notice that I moved in my front view, but then I'll take a look at my work in the 3D view to see how this looks in 3D. Alright, so there I have my stacked 3D logo. So if you'd like to get a little bit more advanced with your logo, feel free to use the Creation tool, Text, and create separate elements for the different letters of your logo or different symbols, and then practice using the Transform tool to manipulate and move those around and stack your logo differently to see how creative you can get with your design. So just to recap, we used our Creation tool, the Text tool, we used different letters, and we also used webbing symbols to create the heart symbol. We then took a look at our transformation tools. We can access those by using the toolbox gizmos on the left, but more quickly or more efficiently we can use our hotkeys Q, W, E, and R. So that completes stage 1, creating our 3D logo text. Just to recap what we completed in stage 1. Well, we've learned about our viewports, our panels, and how we can change our panels between a perspective view and a 4-view layout, and why we would do that, why it's good to work in two-dimensional views. We also learned about our channel box and attribute editor. These areas of the software help us to see the settings and also edit those settings, such as the Bevel Plus amount. We learned how we're able to move geometry in a 3D environment, and also how we can navigate or orbit an environment using the hotkeys Alt left mouse, middle mouse, and right mouse clicks. We also created our 3D text using the Create Text tool from our main menu in the Create, and we came down to our Text tool and explored some of the settings we had available there. So in just a few minutes, we have learned a lot about the Maya interface, and we're already creating our project. And this sets us up nicely for stage 2, where we'll now apply shader materials and give some color to our logo. So before moving to stage 2, we'd recommend to save your scene file, and we'll take a look at a proper naming convention. That way you can reference back to the separate stages as you built your logo. So let's go to File, and we'll go down to Save Scene As, just like we would in just about any other software application. And I'll just use the naming convention 01 3D Logo. Now it's very important that you use the 01 because as we get into stage 2 and 3, we'll use chronological order 2, 3, 4, and that'll help us reference the different stages of our logo if we want to jump back at any time. You can also see the location of where you could find this file at a later time. Maya creates a default project in your Documents folder, just in the default Scenes profile. And that's perfectly fine for now for this starter project. So I'll go ahead and hit Save As to save my project. So at this point we've saved our work, and now we can move forward to our next phase.